Hola clase. I'm going to discuss verbs with you, los verbos in Spanish. There are tres tipos, three types. Verbs, remember, are of course either action words, things we do. Also, there are stative verbs where you just make a statement. For example, to talk. And now I want you to start noticing what happens when we change the ending and spelling of this verb a little bit in Spanish to an O ending. Now it means I speak or I talk. I speak Spanish. Hablo español. Now once we've changed the ending here, it changes the meaning, although it's still having to do with talking or speaking. ¿Hablas inglés? Do you speak English? Compare that to another verb. These verbs we're looking at today are all AR verbs. You'll learn about that more later, but you can see here this ends with AR, so it's called an AR verb. Here's estar, another AR verb. This is not an action verb, it's a stative verb, to be. Even the word state is related to the word estar, your state. So you're asking, what's your state of mind? Hi, how are you? Hola, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien, I'm fine. Compare these endings with this AR verb with the verb hablar. When we wanted to say I speak, you said hablo, you had an O ending. And when you wanted to say you speak, you have an as ending. Notice that in the AR verb estar, to say you is still as, como estás. And to say I, you have an O here, but you have to add a Y. This is something that makes the verb estar an irregular verb because it's going to be different and slightly different than most AR verbs like hablar. Okay, let's keep looking at some examples, expanding your understanding of a verb like hablar, to speak. Now let's change it to él habla un poco español. By changing the ending here and putting él, we have he speaks a little Spanish. Ella también habla un poco español. She also speaks a little Spanish. So both for he and she, we still have the a ending. So what do you think is going to happen with the verb estar in order to say he or she is? It should still end with an a, right? It's pronounced a, and it does. So to say she's not here because she's sick, ella no está aquí porque está enferma. He's not here either. Él no está aquí tampoco. You do notice that estar also has an accent mark written over the last a, pronounced a. And that's of course also part of its irregularity. Most AR verbs in the third person singular conjugative form will not have accent marks there. It affects stress, of course. So you have to stress this on the next to the last syllable because it ends with a vowel. Instead of blah, you say ah. H's are silent in Spanish. Habla, habla. Now with estar in this form, normally because it ends with a vowel, you would have to stress esta, esta. But one of the rules of stress in Spanish is always stress a word where there is a written accent mark. So since it's right on this letter, we're going to have to say está, está. Muy bien. But the spelling is the same, and that was my point. Let's keep looking at some more verbs like this. Once we have an amos ending, we say we speak a lot of Spanish. Hablamos mucho español. A new verb for you, but you recognize the ending. This indicates a we subject. We study a lot of Spanish. Estudiamos mucho español. We are happy with the verb estar, amos. Estamos contentos, like we're content, we're happy. Estamos contentos. So what I want you to notice is the similarity for AR verbs in terms of their endings and what they mean. Let's see, I think I skipped one. Yeah. Here's one more form. Hablan demasiado rápido. They talk too fast. Here's the different verb. They are sick. Subject is still they. On. They are sick. Están enfermos. Think of the word infirmary where you go when you're sick. They study biology. Estudian la biología. Work on your pronunciation. Biología. G sounds like H when it's followed by an I. And the stress goes on the I, pronounced E. He. A. Biología. Biología. Let's look at some more verbs. Almorzar, which means to eat lunch. Trabajar, which means to work. These are this is a term you need to learn. It's called the infinitive form. When a verb in Spanish ends with AR, and in English it would be to something, that's what you call the infinitive form. I like to remember this term as meaning not, because the prefix in sometimes means not. Like incomplete means not complete. Not finished. These verbs are not finished because they have no subjects yet. We don't know who's eating lunch and working. So let's conjugate them. When you put a O in Spanish on a verb, or some of these other endings like amos, which means we, you're now conjugating the verb. So these will be called conjugated forms in Spanish. In English, conjugated forms will have a subject in front, like I work, or we, or you. Okay, so let's get back to something y'all looked at earlier. What's the purpose and function of subject pronouns then? Remember that yo is like I, tú is you, usted is you, like a formal you, and there were other ones that we were learning. How do these connect with verbs? Canto bien means I sing well. So where was the word for yo, for I, in this sentence? Well, consider that canto bien or yo canto bien basically mean the same thing. I sing well, I sing well. There's a crucial difference between English and Spanish when it comes to verbs. You ready? Conjugate a verb from its infinitive form in English, to sing, and notice something. You put your subject pronoun in front, and in most cases when you conjugate the verb, it doesn't change. Sing, sing, you do add an S on this one, sings, we or he sings, but these are all the same. My point is that since they all look the same, if I didn't use the I in front of sing, can you tell me who sings? No, because this sing could be the same as this one, or that one, or that one. So in English, we have to have the subject pronoun in front of the verb in order to conjugate the verb and to understand one another. However, if you noticed in Spanish, if I put all of the conjugated forms of a verb like cantar, which means to sing, you will notice that none of these forms look alike. Therefore, if I simply say canta, I already know it must be third person singular. So the subject here is either he, she, or it, or usted. For this one, there's no other form that looks like it. So this has to mean you, or tú, you sing. So the use of the subject pronoun in front of the verb is optional. Yo canto is the same as canto. This means I sing, and this means I sing. And to give it to you straight, if you want to sound like you're a good speaker of Spanish, get away from the habit of always putting yo and tú in all of your sentences, and simply get comfortable with using the verb in its correct ending to express yourself. The equivalent is, if you were to always speak with these, is to be like when you, in English, you emphasize things with your voice and you say, well, I did it. It's like you're kind of getting heavy-handed with your I emphasis. So the use of the subject pronoun in Spanish should be reserved for if you really want to emphasize the I, then you can put the yo in front. I sing well. It's almost sounds a little funny though. If you want to just say it straight, just say canto bien. I sing well. There are times though when you want to distinguish, between me versus you, right? And so if you want to do that, then you can put your pronouns in there. He didn't do his work. So in Spanish, él, there needs to be an accent mark on it, but él no hizo su tarea, to emphasize the he part. Okay, that's all for now. Adios. In summary, today we looked at verbs. There are 3 types of verbs. We only looked at the type that's called the AR verbs. When a verb in Spanish ends with ar, it's in what's called the infinitive form, which in English will mean to something, in this case to speak. It's called infinitive form because it means it's not finished yet, because it has no subject yet. We don't know who is speaking. In English, we'll put the subject in front. However, in Spanish, when we conjugate a verb, we change the ending of the verb, and by changing the ending of the verb, we give it a subject. For all AR verbs, the endings will be basically the same. O, as, a, amos, an. And each ending corresponds to the subject. This would be yo. This would correspond to the subject tú. This corresponds to él, ella, usted, nosotros, ellos, ellas, which means they, and ustedes, which means y'all. The other two forms of verbs, which we'll look at next time, are verbs that end with er and ir. For example, comer and vivir, how these look in their infinitive form, and what their conjugations look like, which if you just give it a quick look, you'll notice have some similarities to the endings that you saw for AR verbs. Muy bien. Adios.